Hi, my name's Helen Trethewey, and welcome to my second potted webinar. Last time we thought about why it's important to identify dyslexia early, and today we're moving on to think about what are those early signs of dyslexia. If you know what you're looking for, they're actually quite obvious. So the signs of dyslexia show up from a very early age, and that's because dyslexia is a neurological condition which is present from birth. And if you know what you're looking for, the signs can be there very early when the child starts interacting with its parents and other children, when it starts playing with toys, starts moving around, the signs will be there, and particularly when they start to communicate. One of the earliest signs is delayed speech. So it's often their speech doesn't develop quite as typically as other children. It can take them longer to start saying words. And then when they do say words, often they muddle things up. So they don't always hear the word correctly. And so when they say it, it's not quite right. When they're little, it can sound quite cute because they might say things like pacetti instead of spaghetti. And when it's a young child, people think, oh, that's quite sweet. But when you're older and you're muddling things up, it's not quite so cool. One of the example I can tell you is that I used to think that a handbag was a handbag. I did always puzzle why a bag would be made of ham, but that's what it sounded like to me. So they are the children where they muddle up words, ones that sound similar, and then they can also muddle up. They might ask for a spoon when actually they want a fork. So words that kind of go together. And if they're looking at a storybook, very often they won't name the things in the storybook. If you're asking them what's in the picture, they'll go, oh, that thing there, oh, thingy, because they can't, the word doesn't come immediately to their mind. Another sign is to do with coordination. It's not as common, only 20% of dyslexics have coordination difficulties. But again, those signs can be quite obvious from quite an early age. They are the children who are maybe a little bit clumsy. They have difficulty putting their clothes on, fastening buttons. They'll muddle up their left and right shoe. But the key thing is they won't realise they've muddled it up. Of course, we all sometimes put shoes on the wrong way, but they won't realise that they put them on the wrong way. So there's often they're described as bottom shufflers. They're often children who didn't crawl. That's quite common within the ones who have the coordination difficulties. And they might not want to do jigsaws because they have difficulty putting the pieces together. Things like shape sorters can be very challenging for them, whereas that's often a thing a lot of young children want to do. And they might avoid like ball games. Might not really want to kick a ball or catch a ball, which again are activities that young children often want to do. So those can be some of the very early signs. And if there's dyslexia in the family, it's okay to look out for those things, because the sooner you identify dyslexia, the sooner you can do things to actually help. So it's okay to be looking out for these signs. And people often say to me, oh, but lots of children do that. But it is because there are lots of children who are dyslexic. We think now between 10 and 20% of people are dyslexic. So in any class, in a preschool class or a nursery class, there will be children who are dyslexic, and they will show these signs. And we shouldn't dismiss it just because lots of children do it, because actually, if we realise the reason is because of dyslexia, we can then start to do things positively to help the child. So as the child gets older, there are more and more signs, and the signs become more obvious. And it tends to be a kind of cluster of difficulties. So some children will have auditory difficulties, some will have visual difficulties, some will have coordination, and some will have a combination of these things. And it's slightly different in each child. If you have more than one child, their dyslexia might not present in the same way. Or sometimes because it's just one specific area that is affected, like with my son, he only has processing difficulties. He's has slow processing. Then he doesn't have the diagnosis of dyslexia at all, although I'm dyslexic and I have auditory difficulties. So the auditory difficulties, they are the ones who can't remember like a nursery rhyme, or they muddle up the words in the nursery rhyme. They might even hear a song on the radio and then sing it with completely the wrong words. They often muddle up and mishear words, and they have difficulty following instructions if you give them, and obviously age appropriate instructions. But if you say to your child, get your coat and your hat, a dyslexic child might only remember hat and not go and get their coat. So that is definitely a sign. And then other children have more visual difficulties. So they're the children who find it hard to remember what colour something is. They don't get the right colour label. They're very slow to pick up the names of all the colours, which again is like a very common preschool thing. So if they are having difficulty, that is a clear sign, as is not remembering the shape names or having difficulty, as I already said, having difficulty with jigsaws and shape sorters. Um, they might not recognise their name. I mean, children are obviously, you're not expecting a young child to perhaps know the names of the letters, but most children can recognise the shape of their name, or at least recognise the initial letter. And if they can't, then that is a concern, because they should be able to recognise things like their name. And then the coordination difficulties. So they are the children where they have difficulty with balance. They might be slow to want to learn to ride a bike. They want to keep their stabilizers on for as long as possible. They might prefer a tricycle than a bicycle. They muddle up. They might not have a very dominant hand. So they might keep trying which hand they're going to write with. A lot of dyslexics, disproportionately, a lot of dyslexics are left-handed as well. Not that all left-handed people are dyslexic, but it's another part of a piece of the puzzle, shall we say. So once a child starts actual formal education, starts school, the signs just become even more obvious if you haven't already identified it. And if you have, then there's nothing wrong with intervening straight away. You don't have to say, oh, my child's dyslexic. You can just do the activities that will help them. And that will be another webinar, where I'll talk about some of the practical things you can actually do. So as they're starting to learn to read and write, some children pick up sight vocabulary really quickly. And that's why a lot of old reading schemes were based on the kind of look and say method, because there's a lot of children who can learn words just literally by sight without the sounds. But of course, that's a limited way of learning to read. But the ones who can't pick up the sight words and they see the words day after day after day and they have no recollection of them, that is a sign. And also then they seem to muddle up the order of the letters. So they might start reading a word, but something like stop, they might read as spot. Somehow their brain just changes the order. They'll muddle up letters. Things like, and I would look not for B and D, very common, but more for things like I and J, L, L and I, F and T. So if they're muddling up a lot of letters that are visually similar, that's more of a sign, not so much the B and the Ds. And they are the children that where they'll sound words out, but they never seem to remember them. So you've got a book, and a lot of those early books, if you've ever seen them, are very repetitive. The cat sat on the mat, the cat went to the park, the cat did this. And so these are the children who will sound out cat on every page and seem to have no recollection that they've already seen that word before. So that's quite a telling sign. And then, they also misread words. So they might think, so as they get older, something like driver, they might say diver. So they miss out letters from words. And they might miss out particularly some of the small words like in or on, at. They might just miss those words out altogether. So some children, their difficulties are more auditory than visual. And then there are some people who have difficulty with both. Those are normally the ones that people spot straight away. So essentially there's 3 types of dyslexia. There's auditory, visual, and then the ones who have both. So if you have auditory difficulties, it goes back to what I said earlier. So they will muddle up words that sound similar. So back and bag, I mean, you can even see with my mouth, you're doing fairly similar things. It's understandable, but most people don't muddle them up. So it is a sign. And they can't generate rhyme. So if you're trying to say, oh, what rhymes with cat, and you might give them a clue, bat, and then they'll say man, or something that is nothing to do with what you've been saying. They often have trouble blending sounds together, so they might say all three sounds, p, I, n, and then they just look blankly at you. They can't work out what the word is. And then when it comes to actually writing, when they start learning to write, then they will often miss letters out of the words because they don't hear all the sounds within the words. So anyway, coming towards the end of today's potted webinar, I hope you find it useful. Next time, we'll be talking a little bit more about some screeners that you can use. And then after that, we'll go on to some of the practical things that you can do to help. So I hope you found it useful today. Please feel free to share it. Check out my YouTube channel and also my website, Twice Exceptional Learners. Bye.